The Scythe's Commandments. Thou shalt kill. Thou shalt kill with no bias, bigotry, or malice aforethought. Thou shalt grant an atom of immunity to the beloved of those who accept your coming. Thou shalt kill the beloved of those who resist. A world with no hunger, no disease, no war, no misery. Humanity has conquered all of those things, and has even conquered death. Now Scythes are the only ones who can end life, and they are commanded to do so in order to keep the size of the population under control. Citra and Rowan are chosen to apprentice to a scythe, a role that neither wants. These teens must master the art of taking life, knowing that the consequences of failure can mean losing their own. Scythe is the debut of a thrilling new series by National Book Award-winning author Neal Shusterman, in which Citra and Rowan learned that a perfect world comes only with a heavy price. Scythe is the book, the story, the first, the only that got me into reading, that now has changed my life forever, because it has inspired me to not only read, not only to appreciate story on a deeper level, but to write my own stories and become an author. This is going to be a very special episode of Eat the Blank Page with me, Victor Rowe, and I hope everyone is strapped in and ready to go as much as I am for Scythe. Book 1 of Scythe. I'm doing all three, I hope you understand. Scythe was every bit of inspiration for me as much as it was entertaining. It found me at a point in my life where if it found me any later, I would have disregarded it, and if it found me any sooner, I wouldn't have appreciated it for what it was, for what it is. As some of you may know, I did theater for a long time in middle school and high school, and this is where I found Scythe. I found it about sophomore, junior year of high school, and it was unlike anything else I'd ever read. And the part that I read to you, the back blurb and the inside jacket kind of tease, is what really got me reading. And it was, I think it was like the end of chapter 1 or 2, when Rowan, one of the two main characters, stays with this classmate of his to die. And he doesn't die. Rowan doesn't die, but his classmate does. And this classmate didn't appreciate him. He kind of bullied him. He was a popular kid, didn't even know Rowan's name, even when Rowan came into the room to comfort him as the Scythe was taking his life. But there's a lot to cover if anyone is going to have any context for what I'm talking about if you haven't read Scythe. But like I said, please go get your own copy. Please go read it. Read anything about it. Watch any sort of videos. It needs to be bigger than it is. It is Harry Potter's level of like, this should be a bigger property. And I'm wearing my red hoodie, my big old 6X red hoodie, to kind of match Scythe Valentine, even though that is not who it's supposed to be. That's who it is. Just stick with me for a second. So Scythe is a sci-fi thriller, I want to say. Sci-fi coming-of-age story. It deals a lot with philosophy. It deals a lot with life and death, becoming who you are, being molded, mentorship, and leaving your own life behind for something greater. It deals with population control. It deals with AI overlords. It deals with all of these different things, but it does it in such a unique way where most of it is so realistic, it's almost uplifting. So to set the scene of where the world's at right now, like I said before, they've cured death, hunger, disease, death in general. They everyone's immortal. And in this world, you got to figure if everyone's still having kids, everyone's still moving, switching things up, living their life, and everyone's immortal, there's got to be some point where there's too many freaking people and they just need to pump the brakes super hard. That is where Scythes comes in, or Scythes come in. I have a hard time pronouncing it. Where they come to glean, the term that they use, glean people to meet a quota. Every scythe has a different quota. They're allowed to kill you in any sort of way. They are allowed to kill as many number of people in a day as long as they don't break their own commandments, because scythes have their own list of commandments. They're not allowed to kill off of bias. Not being able to kill off of bias is probably one of the biggest parts of being a scythe, is that you are supposed to be a non-biased entity taking life like how death was before in what they call the mortal age or the mortal times. A beautiful moment earlier in the book, like I mentioned, when the scythe is taking the life of a high schooler, he goes through his exact reasoning, and this is where we're introduced to Scythe Faraday, the mentor to Citra and Rowan. And I want to talk about that in just a second, but there's also something about the world you need to understand. Not only is everyone immortal, not only are these scythes self-governing and tasked with controlling the population size, there is a third entity known as the Thunderhead, because the cloud wasn't cool enough, and it is an AI that has access to every camera on Earth, every audio device on Earth, has eyes on every road, street, mountain, house, tree. It has its nanites in every animal. It can have conversations with every single person in the entire world at once without losing concentration on any one conversation. It is the basilisk incarnate, only it's not evil. It is perfect, which is a big plot point. It is perfect. There is no becoming more perfect. It was created with a set of rules that didn't, not that it doesn't allow it to hurt people, its own kind of moral code, its own kind of reasoning takes it away, its own kind of law takes it away from being able to hurt people, to abuse its power. It still does whatever the hell it wants. It has control over every governing body. It replaced governments entirely. It replaced elections. It replaced all of this stuff. The Thunderhead rules the world with justice, with reason, and it is omnipotent, as omnipotent as you can get. If you wish for it to not look into your house, you can turn off the cameras. You can turn off the audio devices. If you wish for to talk to it every day, there are characters in the book who were raised by the Thunderhead. This is the level of AI that we are talking about. So with that scene set, I need to kind of go through the scene that got me into it, because I have no other real way of kind of getting you guys on board. So Rowan is having a really rough day at school. He has one friend that's kind of an airhead. He feels like an outcast in his family. And he makes this really dumb analogy of himself, but I think it's dumb, that he is the lettuce of a hamburger. He's not the bun, which looks good. He's not the burger, which is what you're there for. He's not even the tomatoes that add a little bit of crunch and a little bit of juice. He's not the condiments that add some flavor. He's the lettuce. He's there to be bland, missable. That perfectly sums up how he is. He has the one friend named Tiger, who becomes a bigger character later in the series. But one day at school, he's going, and we see him as kind of like an okay kid. He's not really too bad. He's not too good. He's in the middle. He's the lettuce. Scythe Faraday, who we have no context for thus far, walks into the school, calls down like the quarterback of the football team, takes him into the principal's office, excuses the principal because scythes have near absolute power. Near absolute power. Whatever they say goes, because they're the only people allowed to kill people. He like kicks out the principal. He brings in the kid, and Rowan sees this, and this is where I got interested. Rowan goes and lets himself in the room. Lets himself in the room with a scythe. The only people allowed to kill other people. The only actual way, besides burning to death, that people can actually die. In this world, if you take a bullet to the head, and it wasn't by a scythe, you will be revived the next day perfectly fine. If you cut off an arm, you will be revived the next day with an arm. Just that simple. Now, different injuries take longer, that kind of thing, but besides the point, This kid has the gall to go in and say, this is what he says, I'm going to comfort this guy. He knows the name. The guy doesn't know Rowan's name. He's like, I want to comfort you. He like shit talks the Scythe. He's like, whatever, do your thing. Who cares? You lack humanity anyway. Whatever he says. And he holds the hand of this guy who was kind of like a bully to him, but not really. He didn't know Rowan's name. That was the big part. That got me. He didn't know Rowan's name, but Rowan still went in to comfort him in his final moments. So Scythe Faraday goes down the list. Is like, off of pure statistical probability of the moral age, you fit the exact qualifications for someone who would have died in a car crash. You drink underage. You go out to party events X amount of times, X amount of weeks. You are of high popularity. You're an important figure on the football team. You're used to being popular. You're very careless. You get reckless. All of these things. He runs down the list because he's done his research on this kid, or just on the population in general, narrowing it down to this kid. And this kid can't say anything. He is locked the fuck in. He's panting. He's sweating. He's nervous. He's getting antsy. And so Rowan comes in and comforts him, holds his hand. But he's holding his hand. The way Scythe Faraday kills the kid is electrocution by a device in his palm. He holds the kid's hand and he tells Rowan, you're going to feel every bit of this. You might not die, whatever. You're going to feel every bit of this. No one out there is going to care that you did this at all. No one's going to celebrate you at all. Do you still want to do this? Rowan goes, yeah, fucking big money. Let's run it. And he goes, yeah, sure, I'm down. Electrocutes him. Gone. Rowan blacks out. Kid, dead on the ground. And Faraday is like, hey, that was really cool. You know, you should feel proud of yourself, kind of vibe. And Rowan's like, I'm just doing what anyone else would have done. Scythe Faraday goes, really? You did what everyone else would do? Because as far as I can tell, you're the only one in the room. He punches Rowan right in his logic and then dips. And it was just the funniest shit ever. I gotta tell you, that was one of the bigger parts for me that like really got me into it. But the whole idea that people were dying, that people were getting murdered, killed, gleaned, was such a shock from what I thought books were supposed to be. I was in high school. I was reading How to Kill a Mockingbird. But you know, like, these weren't things that I was used to. A fantasy sci-fi world with these specific rules and these ideas that can get brought up just from the rule set within the world themselves have their own meanings, have their own feelings about them, have their own ideologies. And it was just so fascinating to me that I could get pulled into a world like that wasn't our own, because I was so used to the school's curriculum. I mean, I feel like that's one of the biggest things too, is that when people start reading, it's always in high school. It's always in school. And if they don't go to school, then I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. So the books that we're introduced to were all universally read. Like, everyone's read How to Kill a Mockingbird. Everyone's read or 1984 or Romeo and Juliet. You know what I mean? There's these universal things that were kind of taught in high school, at least in New Jersey, where I'm from, that dull what books can really be. The idea of reading is not flattering. The act of reading is hard. Reading is like running. If you haven't read in a long time for any amount of considerable length, time, duration, whatever, it's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult because your brain is actually working as you're reading. Not only are you looking at the words themselves, all crunched up together and, ooh, they're so tiny, you're interpreting what the words mean, first step. Second step, you're imagining the interpretation in your head. You're setting a mental scene. You're building the room. You're building the setting as the author describes. You're building these characters from nothing. I can say a lady has a tough smile, is tall, and looks like she's in a biker gang, and you've imagined something that I haven't imagined, but you've imagined it because your brain is working. Now, I told you that, and you heard it through your ears. You did not read it. When you read it, you have no vocal kind of tone. You have no accent to it. So your brain has to do a lot of things at once just to read the word read. You know what I mean? So that's why reading is usually difficult for people when they first start off, because they think reading is bland as hell, boring as fuck, and is hard. Why the hell would I ever want to do that? Because it's freaking awesome once you start to read these books that aren't just, oh, I gotta read a book. It's a story. It's a fucking what the hell just happened. It is on the same level of entertainment, if not more so than movies, where you're going through a story with characters and yada yada. Everything's one-to-one. Everything is one-to-one. You have your setting. You have characters, you have actors, you have visual effects, you have descriptions. You know what I mean? It's all of those different types of things. And because this was a genre that I had never read before, being like a sci-fi fantasy thing, I was so drawn back. I was so taken back. And it was really, really, really cool. So the biggest thing that I've noticed whenever I try to get people into reading, I always recommend Scythe first. Always recommend Scythe first, because it was my first book. Why wouldn't I? You know what I mean? I mean, it convinced me to be a fucking author. Like it's definitely got its power. But my big advice is find your genre. There's a genre for everyone. And while you can absolutely enjoy every genre, you can absolutely enjoy every story you read or whatever type of story you want to read, cool. There's a genre of book that will grab you faster than any other genre and will hold you right there, right reading the book, reading the pages, taking in the story. That is the magic moment. For me, it was Scythe. For my girlfriend, it was a book Verity. For one of my friends, it was this book called Mickey 7. For my brother, it was a book called Endurance. There was these things that will grab us that we don't even know what they are. And because the barrier of entry to reading a book is so steep, most people never start. And it's a shame, because it's amazing. It is amazing when you get a good book in your hands, a book that you appreciate. Doesn't matter what anyone else says. Oh my God. But that's what was happening with Scythe. I was reading it in class. I was reading it on the bus to and from track meets. I was reading it at home. I was going crazy for it. And that's not even to mention the best parts of the story, the parts that I like the most. Oh boy, I don't want to go over all of them because we'll be here for way too long, and I only got so much time to edit. You know what I mean? But you have some crazy scenes, some crazy characters that showed me how to balance ideas. Like, you can make a character that is just an ideology and then give them a personality. Like, they're one thing that then become a character. So the main villain in the story is this guy called Goddard. And Scythes will always name themselves something new, but it's always off of someone in history of the mortal age. So Scythe Faraday is based off of Saint Faraday. Citra eventually, spoiler warning, spoiler alert, eventually becomes an official Scythe. So she goes with Scythe Anastasia. And her reasoning is because Anastasia was never given the proper amount of time to live and to find who she was, so she can be anyone, yada, yada, yada. It was actually really cool. So this guy named Goddard, so if you recognize that, that's what that's from. That's what that is. Who is a lunatic. But as someone who writes, I appreciate Goddard in a lot of different ways than what I used to. Because I used to be like, oh, he's crazy. Oh, he's very bombastic. He's very, ooh la la, look at me, I have a katana. And he goes on, chop. And he has this crew of other scythes that he like orders around. It was really cool because up until then, you only know Scythe Faraday, who's honorable Scythe Faraday. He's distinguished among even the scythes themselves. So as you're learning about the world through Citra and Rowan, you're learning about Faraday's way and how he does things. It's very methodical. It's very heartfelt. It's very human. It's very meaningful, honorable, because he's the honorable Scythe Faraday. He's honorable. Goddard is fucking crazy, okay? Introducing Goddard as a disaster Scythe. Perfect. So what Scythe does is establish an idea and then expands on it that I don't really see anywhere else besides the big names like Harry Potter. The idea is that a scythe is supposed to replace death in the new world, in the new everyone's immortal world, right? And this is one corner of the triangle that makes up what Scythe is, or Scythe's world is that Scythes have replaced death. When people die, there's a reason for it. So as every Scythe does their own thing, we see that some Scythes hypnotize their target or people that they glean and then kill them. Arc of A Scythe kills every person in their own different way with a different weapon to honor the person. And he has a huge weapons den. For example, he was going to kill a fencer, someone who fenced as a sport. And so he told them he was going to glean them, but only through a duel. Okay. He duels this guy 3 times, loses every time, but because the other guy isn't a Scythe, Scythe is rushed to the, I forget what they call it, revival center, and then goes back to challenge the guy. Challenges him 4 times, wins the 4th, and the guy dies having put up a fight. He says, at least I got to put up a fight. You know what I mean? So that's his kind of style, where death will come at you statistically, like how it's supposed to happen, or give some sort of thematical element to it. So it's like, oh, I die with my honor intact. I die with my humanity intact. So in our world, the normal world, or what they would call the mortal age, there are disasters that happen. Natural disasters, city disasters, like a train going off the rails, a tornado taking out a town. I think you know where I'm getting to with this. The introduction to Goddard is special because we take the point of view of a random citizen on a plane, just going about their business. And then 4 Scythes walk into the front of the plane, weapons drawn. And he makes this big announcement, hello everyone, thank you for being here, you've all been selected for gleaning. With him saying that, no one can do anything. And if they do, their family is then tracked down and gleaned with no option. Because when someone's gleaned, their whole family gains immunity of gleaning for a year. To put into this database, it's all explained in the book. Go read it. And he's very, hello everyone, it's going to be a great day. You all should be very honored by being selected by the great Scythe Goddard and his crew of fucking new age Scythes. You are part of a revolution, part of a future, blah, 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 blah. This is one of the few disaster gleanings that we see in the actual book. And he kills the entire fucking plane. The entire plane. Like a plane crash. He represents a plane crash. I love that. Because he's representing something that happens in the mortal age, our world, through the idea established in the book that Scythes represent death. And so it fits up so perfectly, it just tickled my brain so much that, okay, you have the idea of Scythes, you have the idea of killing people, natural disasters. What about them? There's another scene in the book where he goes and he kills an entire office building just because he's a psychopath. But not only are you establishing the new kind of idea with killing lots of people all at once to meet your quota, or gleaning a lot of people all at once to meet your quota, the gleanings represent his mindset about gleaning itself. How he walks the very, very narrow line that is Scythe law, the Scythe commandments. Killing with bias, killing too many people, those kinds of things. Of expanding about an idea that doesn't exist but exists in your story. As an author now, as a writer now, is very inspiring. Very, very inspiring. Because I'm looking at my own stories, okay, what concepts do I bring into the world? What ideas, what functions do everything serve? And how have I tapped into the creativity enough to develop the idea to take it a step further, like the disaster sites idea? And it's one of the biggest things that I praise about Scythe is that not only is the world unique, to say the least, the world is fleshed out. It's deep. Things that you might have thought of are there. Things that you didn't think of are also there. The characters bring you into the world. They give you a hand to hold as they traverse the world themselves. And you are also part of the world. You feel as though you can be living in this society, living in this world. It's described to you in such a way that it feels so logical. It feels like it makes sense. You're reading the practices, the laws, how Nimbus agents act for the Thunderhead to communicate with the Scythes, because the Scythes aren't allowed to communicate with the Thunderhead directly. It was a law governed by the first Scythes. Oh yeah, also there's the first Scythes who everyone has gleaned themselves, which is the only way a Scythe can die. Oh yeah, by the way, the only way a Scythe can die is through his self-gleaning. But also, there are these Tonists who are cult that worship sound or whatever the hell, and they're a prominent group in the story as well, and stay prominent throughout the entire series. Like, everything in Scythe is actually building blocks for the entirety of the story, but it's still a story, and it's still intriguing. It still pulls you in, and I cannot recommend it enough. I wish I could take 3 hours just to go over everything I love about the book. But I am coming up on the end of my time, so hopefully you guys got something out of this new kind of style. I don't know if you've noticed, but the new tagline is "Eat the blank page, passionate, analytical word vomit." And so, to stay true to the namesake, I just wanted to rant to you guys about, the book that started it all for me, Scythe. Started in a book tasting from my librarian sophomore year, where she took my class into the library, had a bunch of books around the tables, and we all read a little bit, would move to the next table, would read a little bit more. And on the table I was sat at first was this. So it was almost like it was meant to be, kind of. I should get her a copy of Doppler House. If I didn't mention, I am an author. I know I've mentioned that part a few times, but my book, The Doppler House, is actually now available on Amazon. So go get your own copy. Eventually, I will be doing its own episode, but not for a little while. I have a lot of other stories I want to talk about. Check the description if you're watching on YouTube for a link to buy my book. It is also just on my link tree. That is in every bio you could possibly find ever for all of my social media. If you're interested in getting your own copy of Scythe, you can also check the description for that, along with a link to my link tree. That lets you find all my social media. If you want to follow me anywhere, it's greatly appreciated. I will be back next Tuesday, 2 a.m. I'll be back next Tuesday with a special episode as well, where we'll be covering the second Scythe book. I hope everyone had a wonderful time. My name is Victor Rowe. Goodbye.